Hi everyone, welcome back to Susan Dawn Ascension Connections, part of Susan Dawn Spiritual Connections. I am so happy to be back in this space because I've been really called to go and do more of these deep dive channelings. I love doing the readings that we do and the energy updates, but I'm really called to go even deeper here. It's interesting. I had taken a kind of a step back because there had been so much that was happening and so many energy updates. So I had really been called to kind of take a step back from this for a while, but now I feel like over the past couple of months, I've been called to come back to this space, and I have a whole book of downloads and insights and understandings that have been wanting to come forth. I've been a little bit nervous though. I've been a little bit nervous to come back to this space. And I actually, started this video and had to stop it and just kind of center myself and ground myself. And it's interesting. Today we're going to be talking about time, and my spirit guides came in and just said, Susan, just slow down, just slow down. And that's what we're gonna be doing together. We're gonna be talking about time, the illusion of time, and bringing in Merlin. Merlin is a central figure in this teaching and has been a central figure in this energy that has been coming forth. And if you've been with me in my other energy updates or on my live streams on the Patreon, you know that I've been talking about wanting to do this channeling. But again, I was a little bit nervous. And I feel like it's because it's such a huge concept. And I feel like also because it's been a while since I've done such a deep channeling. We always go deep in my energy updates. It's something that just happens naturally. But this feels a little bit different. This is a different kind of connection. This is a different kind of channeling in this kind of one-on-one, face-to-face kind of energy. So we're just going to kind of give this over to God Source and the universe and see what comes through. I do have some notes here, but we're going to see what comes through. So we're going to, into 2024, we're going to be doing more of these deeper channelings. These are the deep dives into Ascension. And even if you connect to the Sacred Union Path of Ascension, we do channel deeper energies into the journey of twin flame, sacred union, etc., because that has been my path, that has been my experience. And so that's the experience through which I channel, and through which has historically come through for me on this channel. I always say I never anticipated this. I didn't even want this, but that's always just what's been coming through. And if you're new to this channel, or if you just want to dive deeper with me, I have organized all of the playlists on my channel, both channels, on Susan Dawn Spiritual Connections, my main channel as well. This is my sister channel. I've organized everything so it's very easy to find whatever it is that you're looking for. If you're looking for the topics of Sacred Union or Twin Flames, that's in its own playlist. If you're looking into higher heart ascension energies, that's in its own playlist. If you're looking for the light language transmissions, that's in its own playlist. And if you're looking for cosmic support energies, or cosmic channelings as I call it, which is like the astrological events that are helping to support and influence our ascension, that's in its own playlist as well. I also have that organized under the freebie section on my website, so all of the channelings are there as well, and you can check those out there as well. Um, YouTube also has a new feature called For You. So if you go to my main homepage, it's a personalized algorithm for you. I'm not quite sure how it works, but it's personalized for you so that you can see some of my past readings. Remember, everything is timeless, so you take it when it resonates for you, and if it calls to you. All right. I have all these notes, and I have all this energy, and I have all these messages that have come forth over the past couple of weeks and months with regards to this topic. It's a big topic, but I don't quite know where to begin. And I think that's what always makes me nervous, and why I pull back is because it feels so big to me. But that's where I just have to kind of tune in and trust in what it is that I'm receiving. And I'm feeling called to begin with my journey to Europe. So for those of you who are new to my channel, I experienced a spiritual pilgrimage to Europe at the end of September and a little bit into October, where I stayed with one of my dear friends and soul sisters in Bath, England. And what is really beautiful about this is the interconnectedness of it all, in that well, I don't want to go deeply into this. You can follow along on my blog. I go deep into those experiences and the how that experience really affected me, and the manifestation of those experiences on my blog. And I also go into that in the recent channeling here on Susan Dawn Ascension Connections. I think I called it Receiving the Masculine or Connecting with the Sacred Masculine, something like that. But it was all about my experiences, specifically in Glastonbury, England. But this is something that I've been trying to manifest for 3 years, or thinking about for 3 years, and didn't think it was possible until about 6 months ago, last spring, when all of a sudden it started coming together. And my friend said, "Come and stay with me. We'll go to Glastonbury. We'll go to France." And it all just kind of came together in a beautiful, magical way. But when I really look back, I see how those seeds have been planted all along my path. 15 years ago, I spent a month in a writer's retreat in Carcassonne, and that was the crux of my first real spiritual awakening. I've always been spiritual and spiritually connected, but that was the crux of my real spiritual awakening, where I became aware of my spirituality. I was a hot mess during that trip. Again, I go deep into this in the blog. I don't want to recap all of that, but it was a hot mess. And when we were trying to decide, my soul sister and I were trying to decide where did we want to end up, where did we want to go in France, for some reason I was always called to Lourdes, and she said, "Well, why don't we go to Carcassonne?" And I said, "I've been to Carcassonne," and it was a very full circle moment. So we're going to channel about Lourdes as well, because I had some insight with Mother Mary and experiences with Mother Mary and a transmission there. So I do share that on the blog as well, but we're going to channel some more with Mother Mary coming up. But specifically, I want to talk about Glastonbury, and specifically, I want to talk about this experience at Chalice Well. But first, going back, I stayed with my friend in Bath, England, where she lives, and I spent some time exploring the city, exploring the town, and it's a gorgeous town. I love history, feel very connected to history. And I feel like, again, everything is interconnected. I didn't realize until she mentioned, after I booked my flights and we made plans and everything, she said, "Hey, there's a Jane Austen museum here." And I said, "Oh, the dots connected." I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "That's right, because Jane spent time in Bath, and that's where some of her books are set." And I'm a huge literature lover. I was a lit major in college. I'm an author in my other business. I'm a novelist, so I have a huge connection to Regency England and Jane Austen. I love that time period. And I said, I got chills as she was saying that. I said, "I don't feel anything of this is coincidence." I was planning this trip on my own, and I kept holding back, number one, because I didn't have the resources, and number two, because I didn't want to do this on my own. I traveled on my own before, and while I can do it and it's fun, it was just something that I didn't want to do for this trip. I wanted to go on a spiritual pilgrimage. I wanted to go to Glastonbury, and I wanted to go to Lourdes. For some reason, Lourdes kept calling to me. Um, but, and I'll explore that later. But, I knew I didn't want to go on my own, and I hadn't shared that with really anybody. This dream of mine, I hadn't really shared that with anybody, until during a chat I shared that with my friend, and she said, "Well, I'll go with you. Come and stay with me." And so now, when she mentioned the Jane Austen Museum many weeks and months later, into our planning the trip, it all started to make sense. It all started to come full circle. Now, she has her own experiences. She had her own downloads, her own insights, and her own, takeaways from the trip. But this was mine, and this is what I was meant to experience. And there's so much that I experienced. Number one, it was that full circle moment going back to Carcassonne. It was the transmission and understanding that I received in Lourdes, and it was everything that was experienced in Glastonbury. And again, I go into that in the sacred channeling, specifically with regards to the sacred masculine. So when I was in Bath, I spent some time at the Jane Austen Museum, which was really pleasant for me. And then I spent some time walking back through the town to meet my friend. And I had a beautiful encounter. I had, with somebody who just felt like a kindred spirit, and it just felt like a soul interaction for that moment in time. But what's interesting is, no matter when I was there or where I was going, whenever I was in that city, whenever I was in that town of Bath, it's like I felt the threads of time. I'm somebody who has always been connected to time. Time has always been something that I have felt. In my earliest poetry, I would talk about time, capitalized the T in time, that kind of thing. Time always felt very visceral to me. Time always felt very real. And I always felt in some way the fluidity of time, that we weren't always just, um, that we weren't just pigeonholed into one timeline or one time frame or one century. History has always been important to me, not for the events that happened, but because of the people and the connections. For myself, when I write my novels, I write novels, what I like to call nostalgic novels, but it's not of great important events that happen, but of the quiet moments that occur, the magic of everyday life. And what's interesting to me and why I write those novels is because you can plop those experiences into any time period and it would still hold true. It's the universal truth of our human experience. And those are the stories that I write, and that's what's always connected me to history. I don't care so much about the big events, except that can we learn from them? What I care about is the connection, the universal connection of what it is to be human. Whether this is somebody that is living in the 1940s, who's living in the 1800s, who's living in the 14th century, it doesn't matter. It's the universal experience, because I learned from a very early age through my work and through my writing and through books that we all share the same core themes. And that's what I began to understand as I grew as a writer, as an author, was we all share those core themes. I have my laptop as I'm recording this, my camera here, on my Shakespeare book. That's how I have my setup, because it gives like a lift here. But it's a Shakespeare book that I used in college, to study in college. And what's really interesting is I'm getting called to Shakespeare, and how Shakespeare is universal because he explores those themes in one way, shape, or form. And it's the themes of death and dying and life. It's the themes of love and connection and family, the themes of friendship, the themes of romance, the themes of growing up and coming of age. Those are the themes that we all experience in our life journey, and it doesn't matter what time frame you're in. Yes, the culture changes. Yes, society changes, but we all experience that. We all have thoughts, we all have emotions, we all have perspectives, we all have experiences. And these are universal experiences, and we just might approach it differently depending on the timeline that we're in, or the century that we're in, so to speak. So that's what I love about history. And I've always felt connected to time as a result of that. And always had a fascination with time as a result of that, because again, it's not the events that matter to me. It's the people, it's the connections to those universal themes that connect us all, because we are truly all interconnected. And how can we learn from that? How can we grow from that? How can we understand each other in a greater capacity? And how can we understand humanity in a greater capacity? So as I'm walking through Bath, it's interesting because I have this connection to Regency England because of my love of Jane Austen and Regency, the Regency era. Um, and just like the romance and the expression and the care, the courtship that we took, and not so much in like a romantic sense, but the respect that was had. And I always feel very grateful for the time that I live in now, because we have come a very long way when it comes to recognizing and honoring each other. But I feel also that sometimes it feels like there are missing pieces, like that courtship, like that respect, like that honoring of each other. And there's always going to be, a romanticized energy of that, looking at the past through rose-colored glasses, and we have to allow ourselves not to do that. But I feel like there are certain aspects that we can and should carry through and learn from and grow with. And I feel like when we have that sense of nostalgia for the past, it's because we're missing some of that where we are now. So I feel very connected to Regency England, and I was walking through just such historic and um, I don't have another word for it, historic architecture, these buildings that have lasted for centuries and centuries and centuries, and these streets that have been walked upon for centuries in various capacities. Bath is known for the Roman baths. And I actually swam. We went to the spa on my final night there, and I actually swam in not the same waters, not the same water, that'd be gross, but in like the similar waters. It was the similar minerals as they used in ancient Roman times. How do I say this? The same minerals were in the water that we swam in, that they swam in ancient times, and it was fascinating to me. And so I was very present on my trip. I was very grounded throughout that whole experience, throughout my whole journey. And it was something that I intended. I wanted to be very present. I wanted to be very anchored into the present moment and what I was experiencing. What was interesting is as I was walking the streets, I could feel the threads of time kind of weaving around me. I could feel, that ancient Roman architecture. I could feel, that Regency energy. I could feel it. And in some spaces, I could actually see the weaving of that timeline, and it looked just like a thread of energy, like a thread of time. And it was so fascinating to me to experience that. So I experienced that in Bath, and I experienced that a little bit in Waves in Carcassonne, not so much in Lourdes. I had my own experience, a different experience in Lourdes. But and definitely in Carcassonne, I felt my own timeline being woven and being completed in a sense because I had come full circle from 15 years ago, my first experience there. And Carcassonne this time was just so joyful and so present and just, it felt so peaceful and good. Um, then I had the experience in Glastonbury. So to put this into context, I spent a couple of days in Bath, where we went to Glastonbury, and then we went to France to visit Lourdes and Carcassonne, and then came back to Bath. So Glastonbury was within the first couple of days there. And it was an incredible experience, by which I mean it was something that was beyond my wildest dreams, something that I never anticipated or expected, and something that I don't think I will able to ever fully articulate. Um, and something that I feel will continue to come up for me in new understandings and new insight, over these next couple of months and these next couple of years. It was that profound. And there was so much that was experienced there. So, my soul sister and I went to Glastonbury. We met another soul sister of mine there, who I'd never met, but she had been a client of mine for since the beginning of my journey here, and had become a very good friend and soul sister. And so we all met up, and it just felt so incredibly. I don't want to say serendipitous, but it was fated. It was definitely fated that it all came together at that precise time, in that moment, in that place. So I go deeper into this in that other sacred channeling. I'll put the link in the description box. I do want to talk about something specific that happened there, however. So we go to Chalice Well, and Chalice Well is a sacred garden that is connected to the divine feminine energy. And immediately the three of us are drawn to these what we call twin trees. So in the garden that kind of overlooks the town, that kind of overlooks this hill and the rest of Glastonbury, there are these two twin trees. That's what we called it, because they're standing side by side, but there's a lot of open space in between. And wordlessly, without saying a word to each other, we all naturally start walking. I'm getting chills as I say this in remembrance of this. We all start walking towards this open space between the trees, like we're drawn there together. And again, I talk about this in the other sacred channeling, go deeper into the why and how. But as I personally am walking towards that open space, what we feel as a portal, very much felt like a portal. I'm starting to visually see with my mind and with my visual sight, the landscape change around me. So it's a garden, right? In 21st century, it's a garden. It's beautifully landscaped. There's some open space, there's the trees, but it's beginning to change around me, and it's growing very thick, like a wood, like a forest. And I'm feeling like I'm falling back in time. I'm still very grounded, I'm still very present, but I can feel myself going back in time energetically. And all of a sudden, it feels like it's the three of us there. I'm seeing us in cloaks, in like hunter green cloaks. And we're all standing there. And what's interesting, and I talk about this in the channeling, is that my soul sisters had similar experiences. So we're standing there in this portal, essentially, is what it is, truly. If I wasn't on the spiritual journey, I would think that sounds crazy, but that's exactly what it is because the energy was so thick. And we're having these experiences. And so we're standing there, and all of a sudden I'm feeling the energy of time, and I'm feeling like we are back in medieval times, and I'm feeling the energy of Avalon and Camelot, and this is where Glastonbury is where the mythical city of Camelot and Avalon is purported to have been. And I'm feeling it, and at this point I don't know a whole lot of Glastonbury. I mean, I had read a little bit about it prior to my trip. I know I was called there for a purpose, but I don't know a whole lot about the history. I don't know a whole lot. I'm kind of going into it a little bit blindly, um, except for, knowing that it had that history connected to Camelot and connected to Avalon. But what's interesting, especially as I've channeled Merlin and channeled Avalon and Camelot previously before this trip. So what's interesting is I'm feeling the energy of this medieval wood, and it feels ancient. It feels ancient, and it feels thick, and it feels very paganistic. By which I mean it feels like it's very connected to the healing arts, and the natural healing arts. It feels very natural. It feels very grounded. It feels very earthy. Um, and even though it feels like there's magic, that magic feels, number one, light, it feels healing, and it feels very connected to the natural elements. Earth, air, fire, wind, feels very connected to that energy, and that's the energy that's in the air. And as I'm looking out over this hill, like I'm seeing the landscape with my physical eyes as I am in the 21st century, but I am somewhere else. I am back in medieval times. I am back in, it feels like, I don't even know when it is, but I am feeling the ancientness of this wood. And again, it's, even though the landscape looks the same as like a garden, there is, it's a denseness in my mind. It looks very dense around me, very thick around me, um, and I'm beginning to see that with my physical eyes, almost like the landscape is beginning to change too. And all of a sudden, I see a figure trudging up the hill towards me, because it's still a hill. The landscape is still the landscape, but rather than the architecture of the garden, it's a wood. So there's still a hill, but it's, rather than the garden and there's a little well at the bottom, it's a forest. So I see a figure trudging up the hill. He has a cloak on, he has a long beard, and he has a staff in his hand. And instantly I know that this is Merlin. I've connected with him before energetically, I've channeled with him before. And instantly, and it's interesting because he's like, he's a very old man. Um, he's laughing at that right now. He's saying ancient. Ancient, you can use the word ancient. He's trudging up the hill as like that's his gait that he has. He's like, he's having a hard time trudging up this hill because it is a hill, and he's coming towards us. And he was our guide essentially through Glastonbury, through Chalicewell specifically. And we had a lot of experiences in Chalicewell. I had a lot of experiences in Chalicewell, and I go into that in the other sacred channeling. But I'm getting called to bring that forth now, almost like because it's bringing him forth, to kind of set the stage for this channeling, to set the stage for this video, and what we're going to be talking about here, and the energy of time. Um, Time is a decidedly human construct. I'm going to call to this a client of mine gifted me this deck. I've always wanted a Christmas deck. Did not know a Christmas deck existed. So she said, you manifested this, and she sent it to me. It's the Yuletide Tarot deck. And what's really beautiful about this, I feel like it came in the perfect timing, because there is a card here that really points to this energy of time. And what's interesting is Merlin's coming through right now, and he's saying that even though this is Santa, he's like, that's me. That's me. And you see the clocks here, and how the clocks are like wibbly wobbly, and how there's so much energy. Like time is a portal itself, is what he's saying. What Merlin is saying, time is a portal itself. And you see how it's very fluid. It's not a rock solid structure. If you look at a watch, for example, or a clock, it's a very solid structure. Here, it's very fluid. It's very, for lack of a better phrase, wibbly wobbly. To quote Doctor who is also connected to the energy of time. Doctor Who being a Time Lord. So if you watch Doctor Who, I mean, there's so much that is there about the concept of time and the fluidity of time, and even the illusion of time. Doctor Who is a fantastic show for anybody who is into metaphysics, because there's so much that has been poured into that show. And I'm even hearing like subconsciously is the right word, subconsciously poured into that show, to help us understand uh, just a lot about the universe and universal laws, including the energy of time. So that's an interesting message that's coming through from Merlin. But you see how like there's this energy between these two clocks, and that's because time itself is a portal. Now, as humans, we tend to think that we are stuck. We tend to adhere to the concept of time. Before our awakening, for example, we might have 9 to 5 jobs, and we might be stuck in routine, and it feels very like rigid and organized and structured. And that is what our concept, our human concept of time becomes. But time is not a concept. It's not a how do I say this? Time is a human construct. Time still exists universally. From a higher perspective, from an energetic perspective, time still exists, but it's much more fluid. Time, rather than a linear line, is a circle. It is ever unfolding. And we have to remember that we are multidimensional. As soul, we are multidimensional. As spirit, we are multidimensional. And that's what we're beginning to really understand and embrace. And he's saying grasp on this ascension journey, is that we are multidimensional, and that we are not beholden to the burden of time. And this is where that light language transmission, I feel, is going to come in. We're not beholden to the burden of time, that linear time stream that we often feel stuck in. um, I'm just getting called to this analogy. If you have appointments and you have this and you have that, it's this. I'm going to be late, or I'm going to be early, or I'm going to be this, or I'm going to be that. We attach ourselves to time, allow ourselves to open up to the understanding that time is very fluid. And if you've ever been somewhere where you don't want to be, or experiencing something that you don't want to experience, you'll feel time slow down, or you'll feel time speed up. I'm getting drawn to when I first met my sacred partner. It felt like we were in a sacred bubble, and I would look at the clock, and it was like so much time had passed, but it felt like no time had passed at all. Like hours had passed, but it felt like no time had passed at all. It's that kind of it's that kind of energy. It's that kind of construct. It's that we ourselves are connecting to the energy of time, and we ourselves can speed up or slow down time, and we ourselves can even travel back in time and experience time in many different ways. Time is very fluid. It is not fixed to our human condition. um that is the illusion of time that we get so often caught up in, right? Time itself being that portal. So, so often we have, I'm going to keep this out, I feel. So often we have these wounds around time, because that is the human condition too, because we have these preconceived notions, we have these beliefs, we have these blocks, we have these ideas as a collective consciousness, as a society. And that's too what we are releasing with regards to our ascension journey. We're understanding the true nature of ourselves. We're understanding that we are fluid, that we are energy, and that everything is energy and everything is interconnected, that it's not one thing or the other. So we have these wounds around time as well. Again, maybe there's not enough time, maybe there's lost time, maybe there's too much time, and a fear of too much time, fear of eternity stretching out before us. But again, these are all illusions, these are all fears, these are all blocks, these are all beliefs that we have. In truth, time is ever unfolding all around us, and they just keep showing it to me as a circle, because time is always happening at various different degrees. I'm going to get to that in a second. I had to shut my phone off because I kept getting phone calls and I kept getting my phone vibrating from messages, like people blowing up my phone. And I feel like that's not a coincidence, because it almost feels like that's the distraction of time, right? It feels like it feels like it time. And when we focus on the illusion of time, like I don't have enough time, or I have to do this right now, or I have to do that, like it gets us out of our present energy, it gets us out of our present moment, it gets us out of that connection to ourselves. And sometimes we have to, like I said in the beginning of the video, just kind of slow down and connect back to ourselves and bring it back to this present moment and what we were doing. So I feel like that was no coincidence, that I had to pause there and just kind of turn off the phone and kind of disconnect from everything to bring it back to right here, right now, in the present moment. The present moment really is all there is. Now, there are time streams that stem from that present moment, and time streams that go off into the future, but the present moment, I always say, is our point of power, because this is where we create. Every future moment comes from the present moment before it. And every past energy is a potential future timeline to bring us into the present. I'm going to show it to you like this. We've talked about it. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know I often use the pyramid, because it's like these lines of the pyramid leading up to the central point are these maybe past timelines, and they all converge on the present moment. So wherever you were, maybe this is past lifetimes, or maybe this is just, past energies within this incarnation, who you were, the experiences that you had, maybe mistakes that were made, decisions that you made, choices that you made, all converge on the present moment, on this now moment. Now, from this present moment, you have multiple timelines and time streams that kind of you get to choose from, that you get to manifest from. This is your point of power. This is your point of consciousness. The more aware we are of ourselves in the present moment, the more connected we are to ourselves in the present moment, the more we get to consciously create those future timelines. That's what it means to be a conscious manifester. That's what it means to be a master manifester. So, for example, again, say this is our present point of power, this circle here. And it's interesting because I'm getting drawn to like a spiral, deeper and deeper into connection with ourselves, deeper and deeper into awareness of ourselves. So this is all of the past, right? And we, in our human construct, tend to think of it as very linear, with certain, plot points along our storyline, along our human story, certain memories, certain experiences, certain ages. For example, this is age 3, this is age 7, this is age 14, this is age 22, this is age 60, whatever. This is, so we tend to think of it as very linear. And memory is interesting, because memory has us going back to those time frames. And for maybe within those memories, we can relive those experiences, but we always bring ourselves back to the present moment. That's what it means to be grounded. That's what it means to be stable. What they're actually bringing me is interesting. I have had 2 grandparents with dementia. My first grandmother had Alzheimer's when I was 12 years old, and it was very difficult to watch her go through that. I actually took care of her along with my family when she had Alzheimer's. And then just a couple of years ago, my last surviving grandparent my grandmother died and she had the beginning stages of dementia. And so it's very difficult to watch um, a loved one go through that. And it's bringing up a lot of emotion. Actually, my first book, Golden Days of Summer, explores my childhood living with a grandmother with Alzheimer's and trying to understand what is it that she's experiencing, what memories is she holding on to, um, what is it like to forget somebody that you love, what is it like to experience that, because I was on the outside as a loved one, kind of looking in, and to me, it was like, is she suffering? And Spirit is telling me no, she wasn't suffering because she was just living in another timeline. And it's almost like we were creating that suffering. And the only way that she was confused was because when she looked at me, when my grandmother looked at me, she thought that I was my mother, her daughter. And the only reason why she was confused is because we kept saying, no, I'm Susan, or no, this is my mother, or no, this is this. But she was living in another timeline. She was living in another dimension. It's interesting because it's calling me to a beautiful movie that I should probably watch it again, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. What happens if you don't remember, right? Um, and so my grandmother wasn't necessarily suffering because she didn't know any better. She was living in that other timeline where I was her daughter because I looked so much like my mom that I was her daughter. Um, and it's painful for the loved one. It's painful to feel forgotten. But the love is still there. Wow, that just really hit home. The love is still there. The love doesn't go away. Um, And even though she's living in another timeline where you might not exist, doesn't mean that you don't exist to her. My grandmother and I were extremely close. So it's very interesting. I feel like this is a lot of healing for me as I'm even doing this teaching. So it's really interesting that this is coming up for me. I'm going to have to explore this on my own outside of the video. I want to bring it back to this teaching, and I'll explore that on my own later. Um, but it's interesting because it's like the memory is living in another timeline. Now, when we experience trauma, we experience it as if it's present. And that's where trauma repeats itself, and that's where trauma has to heal. Memory enables us to kind of go back to the past, but still be very present and grounded in the present state. Trauma is an ungrounded energy, and that's what needs to heal. That's where trauma needs to heal, for example. Um, and interesting that this is coming up for me now, because that is something that I experienced that was traumatic for me as a child, that is coming up for healing. So that's very interesting. Now, when we look at past lifetimes, it's memories of past lifetimes, but again, we're not living in those past lifetimes. We might feel the energy of those past lifetimes. We might be living in those past lifetimes during regressions, but we're still grounded in the present. Your regressionist or your practitioner will still be capable of, if they're a good practitioner, they will ground you in the present moment so that you become an observer of that past lifetime versus reliving that experience. But it's all consciousness. That's what time is. Time is itself a consciousness, they're saying. And so what happens is from that present moment, from that present point of what I like to call power, because that's where your present moment is where you create, is where you go back to the past if you are going through a regression or you're experiencing past lifetimes or memories or whatever it is, or that's where you create the future. Again, even every word that I speak is another moment that passes, and every word that I speak and every moment that passes is moving me towards a future timeline. Does that make sense? So you have infinite numbers of timelines, so much so that our human mind cannot grasp the concept of infinity, and we're not meant to in our human capacity. As we connect more and more to our spiritual nature and ascend in our consciousness, yes, we can understand multiple timelines and infinity. But in our human construct, especially prior to awakening, we just think that it's one solid line, that it's the future. But the future hasn't been created yet. The future is created with every present moment. And again, the present moment becomes the next present moment and the next present moment and the next present moment. The present moment is constantly shifting too. So even though our human minds, our unconscious minds, think that it's solid, and that's where we get caught up in, there's too little time, the time wound, as I like to call it, too little time, or if for some they actually um, they have a wound against too much time, that it stretches on and on and on. Depends on where you are in your journey, in your mental health and capacity, what your experiences are, what your perspective is. But that's where people are like, oh, I have to retire at age 65, and I have to do this by age 40, and I have to do this by age whatever. And then here is, the cutoff line. This is where, I can expect to cease existence or cease living in this incarnation, this human experience. But remember that time is much more fluid than that you are creating in every moment. And that's where all the infinite timelines come out. I can't even draw the number of timelines that are available to us. Now, what happens is you have these infinite timelines, and I'm going to get some, hold on. Okay, so what happens is you have these infinite timelines, and what I want to do is use some coloring to kind of to show this. So you have these infinite timelines. When you are aware of yourself in the present moment, when you're very connected to yourself and in a conscious state of being, that's where your point of power is. I've said that before. So you have timelines here in orange, timelines here in blue. I apologize that you guys might not be able to fully see that. I'm doing the best I've got with the materials I have. So let's say that you have blue timelines and you have orange timelines, and say that those represent the full spectrum of time, by which I mean unconscious states of being and conscious states of being, by which I mean more negative timelines of things that maybe you don't want to experience, and more positive timelines of things that you do want to experience. And let's put this into context for greater understanding. When you are in an unconscious state of being prior to your ascension, all those timelines exist, and you can move into any of those timelines at any given state. And so you have a number of different timelines, and it could be lower consciousness energies, like experiences that you don't want to have, that you don't consciously want to have, and higher energies like abundance, things that you do want to manifest, things that you do want to experience, timelines that you do want to experience. And from that present point of power, from that present moment in your conscious state, you then get to choose. So maybe the orange is those lower consciousness experiences. For example, I experienced illness, I experienced job loss, things like that, things that I don't want to experience, and didn't want to experience even back then, obviously, but that became part of my experience. And it's the energy of what you resist persists. If you continue to focus on that energy, if you continue to make choices that are in a lower consciousness state of being, then those timelines will continue to persist. But if you choose consciously to shift out of that, for example, if you shift out of victimhood, if you shift out of lack mindset, if you shift out of scarcity mindset, if you heal those beliefs and those blocks, then what happens is you shift in consciousness, and that leveling up in consciousness creates new time streams where those lower consciousness time streams fade away. I go deeper into those channelings in some other readings. I don't want to really repeat myself and go deep into it here. But it's all time. It's all the illusion of time. Time is not a fixed thing. You get to choose your time frames, your time streams, your timelines. You get to choose based on your level of consciousness. And the more that you raise in your frequency, the more that you raise in that level of consciousness, the more the lower dimensional consciousness or the lower frequency consciousness and timelines fade away, so that now you get to choose from higher timelines. So let's say, for example, through this ascension journey, you've shifted in consciousness so that you're you're choosing higher timelines. You're choosing timelines of abundance versus scarcity. You're choosing timelines of commitment versus non commitment and connections. You're choosing timelines of health versus non health. For example, the more conscious you become, the more you create that reality because you're moving consciously into that new timeline. So I hope that makes sense. So a lot of us, through this ascension journey, we begin to understand that time really is an illusion, and that there's multiple timelines. It's not a fixed thing, that we get to become the masters of our own destiny. We get to create from that present moment, from that point of time. And that's why it's so important to be present, because when you're present, that's when you are fully conscious and you're able to fully make choices within that level of consciousness. Because otherwise, you're just repeating patterns of the past, or otherwise you're just in anxiety of the future and holding yourself back and moving into self-doubt and all that anxiety of the future. But being present enables you to have that kind of bigger picture, that wider lens, because when you're present, you're connected to your soul, and your soul has that greater perspective. Your soul has that blueprint, and your soul is what is guiding you into those healthier, happier, more abundant, higher frequency timelines. And that's where we always say, trust the guidance of your soul. Trust your intuition. Your intuition is guiding you towards those higher timelines. Many of us carry, again, the wounds of time, where we feel like we have too little time, or we feel like there's too much time, or we feel like we've lost time. For a long time, I carried a wound with regards to my connection, because I felt like, what if we had met, or if we had come together, it's like we lost 20 years, my connection and I. It's like we lost 20 years. What if, things had been different back then? What if we had, done things differently? What if we had approached things differently? But I had to release that wounding to understand that there were experiences that both of us had to have in order to reach where we are now. Remember, everything is interconnected, including your life. You have certain experiences for your soul growth. So even though time is fluid, even though time is an illusion, even though we have certain experiences here, certain time frames. For example, experiencing something at age 10, experiencing something at age 35, experiencing something at age 60, whatever it is, it's for a purpose. It's for your evolution. It's for your soul growth. So the more conscious we become, and the more we shift our frequency into that higher level of consciousness, the more we can say, okay, I wish to learn without that struggle of the past, because I learned from that struggle of the past before. I wish to learn through love now. I wish to learn through play. I wish to learn through adventure. I wish to learn through connection, healthy connection, versus learning as you did in the unconscious state in the past. So you have those experiences because you were in an unconscious state. And I always say, have compassion for the unconscious version of yourself. You don't know what you don't know. It's only when you learn something, now you know it, you do something with it, right? I had channeled a phrase right before we began this channeling: what is old becomes new again. And this happens on a number of different layers, or this is resonant on a number of different levels. What is old becomes new again. That's the inner spiral of our ascension. You don't know what you don't know. You might have a basic understanding of one thing, maybe of a concept, but as you go along your ascension journey and as you raise in consciousness, you learn about it, or you understand it on a deeper level. That's the inner spiral, coming back around to truths in new ways and new light. And sometimes it's not until you're here where you are now that you can reflect back. Hindsight being 2020, right? It's not until you're able to reflect that you're able to learn and see what it was that you learned, and see what it was that you grew through that experience. So it's not about denying your past, and it's not about it's about allowing yourself to have compassion for where you were in the past, and allowing yourself to now, through the present moment, make more conscious choices and more conscious decisions of where it is that you want to go. It's a very interesting energy time, because what's happening now on this ascension journey from an individual perspective and from a collective perspective is there's multiple timelines that are weaving, multiple realities that are happening all at once. We're at a time where we're experiencing an accelerated ascension. And that's where it feels like time is speeding up. If you look back to even last year, last month, last week, yesterday, it's like, where did the time go, right? I can look back and I can say, oh my gosh, it's been 2 months since I was in Europe. It feels like yesterday. And while I was there, it felt perfectly aligned. So perfect, in fact, that it felt like um, I was so present that it felt like it was happening at such a pace where it wasn't going too slow and it wasn't going too fast. But now that I'm home, it's like time feels like it's speeding up, and I can't believe it's been 2 months since I was there. And we're experiencing that. A lot of us have experienced that since 2020, where there was a huge shift. A lot of us have experienced that, where it's like, where has the time gone? All of a sudden, we have the holidays here. It's Christmas time. Where has the year gone? That's because of the ascension energy. The ascension energy is speeding up, and there are multiple timelines and multiple realities that are being woven around us. And that's where somebody's experience, or one person's experience, might be very different from another person's experience. One person might be experiencing one reality, so to speak, and another person might be experiencing another reality. And it's all because of frequency, it's all because of the levels of consciousness. Your level of consciousness really dictates or informs the timeline that you're on. And again, there's multiple timelines and multiple time streams that are happening. Um, so what I'm going to do is I just want to pull a couple of cards and see if there's anything else that wants to come through. I feel like a lot of these channelings that we're doing are going to be a foundation and a basis for more channelings to come. So we're kind of just laying the foundation here for deeper dives and deeper channelings about this, kind of like as a starting point. So I want to see, I'm going to use this deck. I want to see if there's anything else. I'm using the Avalon decks. One is called the Wisdom of Avalon. One's called the Mists of Avalon. So let's see if there's anything else that wants to be said about this energy. So the card that flipped out, we have Truth. What's interesting for me for this, there's a lot of cards that flipped out, but I'm only going to take that one. What's interesting to me about this is we have this bridge here. And it almost feels like time is the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious. And that's where time is the portal. Time itself is the bridge. And it's wibbly wobbly because it's fluid. Because time itself is a consciousness. And the more that you shift from the unconscious to the conscious, the more you cross that bridge and shift into different timelines. That's where time becomes the portal. Very interesting visual they're giving. And that's where they're saying the cosmic support comes in. We just did a 1212 gateway channeling, and that's where I talk about astrological events as cosmic support, or these portals that we call 1111, 1212, the solstice energy, the lunar cycles. It's all cosmic support helping us along our ascension journey, where it amplifies the energy so that we can have that conscious awareness to make those shifts for ourselves. And we just talked about how 1212 into the new year is a huge gateway, an energetic gateway where the energy is amplified. And that's a portal in and of itself. That's what a portal is. It is a bridge. And what they're sharing now is that with this energy, you always have a choice. With these portals, you always have a choice. Portals, gateways, or open doorways for you to allow for that shift. If we're in resistance to that shift, then we kind of hold ourselves back. And we have to have compassion for ourselves, because we know when it's time for us, right? We know when it's time for us to have a breakthrough or to make a shift. But once we're conscious of it, that's when we have to make different choices. And sometimes those choices mean changing patterns, changing behaviors, changing perspectives, healing beliefs or healing blocks that we have. That's what making choices, conscious choices, really means. It means allowing your mindset to shift so that you're more in alignment with your soul. And so these portals, these gateways, are open doorways for us to shift into higher timelines, but that shift comes from a conscious awareness. And portals, gateways, doorways are always happening, and they open when you're ready. They open for you. So it's not, oh my gosh, 12:12 passed. It's not 12:12 anymore. So I ruined my chances. No, not at all. Not at all. There is always, number one, there's always portals that are opening, and doorways that are opening, gateways that are opening. These 12:12 gateways and cosmic events are just amplified energy to support you and help you move through. But you can always make that conscious choice. When you make that conscious choice, that's when you shift. And that's when the timeline shifts. We have the card, the Abbey, and this is referring to Glastonbury Abbey, which is interesting because I also went there. And when I was there, we had had a major experience at Chalice Well, and at the White Spring. And then when we went to Glastonbury Abbey, it just felt like peace. It just felt serene. It just felt like the energy was still. And I was very centered, very grounded, and it just was just pure peace. I don't have another experience for it or another word for it to articulate it. I wasn't experiencing anything otherworldly like I was in the other places and the other sacred sites. It was just a place for my soul to have some kind of respite. And I feel like what they're saying is sometimes on your ascension journey, there is a point in time, a point in time for you to have that place of respite, for you to have that place of rest. So if it feels like things are not happening or like energy is stagnant, allow yourself to surrender to that, allow yourself to sit in that energy, and allow yourself to be anchored back into the present moment with yourself. Because it doesn't mean it's going to stay stagnant for long or forever. There might be that you're kind of in between two timelines. That's a transition energy, that's a transformation energy. And so if you're feeling that stagnancy, that feeling the need to just kind of be with yourself, to rest, as we channeled for the 12:12 portal, for example, it's because you're shifting timelines and there's a transition for that. Remember, everything is energy, and everything manifests from the inward out. So it's energy first, and then it manifests into something physical, tangible that you can touch, into our physical reality. So you might be feeling the energy of a timeline shift. You might be in this kind of portal, this gateway energy. That's where it feels a little bit wibbly wobbly, but that's where you allow yourself to surrender and be very present with yourself. Allow yourself to trust your intuition, trust your soul, where you're being guided, if you're being guided to rest. Because once you kind of anchor into that new timeline, then you kind of start going, then you start moving again. So there's also this energy of in between. And if you're in that in between, just be in that sanctuary of yourself. Okay, I think what we're going to do is we're going to end this here because this felt like a lot. And again, it felt like a foundation. And we're going to come back with some more channelings with Merlin because I feel like he has a lot more to say. But I wanted to go through what I had already channeled, and what I had already kind of written down and insight I had already gained. But we're going to definitely come back with more kind of spur of the moment channelings with Merlin on this energy and see how we can go deeper with this and learn more and go deeper with these teachings. All right, let me know how this resonates for you. I'm sending you so much love and so much light, and we'll see you soon.